Hello, just a quick one before we get into this week's pod. If you're listening in on your usual podcast platforms, we should now be on YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube, head over to your podcast platforms to subscribe to us there so you never miss an episode. I'll more than likely whip these videos up at midday on Mondays, but we'll see what the algorithm has to say about the timings. We've also switched recording software to make the transition to YouTube easier too. So please bear with us whilst we, or should I say I, learn the ropes. Anyway, let's get on to the pod. And hopefully I should be able to just play the intro here. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Green and White, brought to you by Argyle Live. In the week that absolutely none of us were worried about Steven Schumacher's departure, the Greens ventured up to the King Power Stadium to face off against champions-elect Leicester City in a battle that saw the recent Champions League side host the current champions of League One. Jamie Vardy shat his pants, quite literally so I've heard, and decided to give this one a miss, unlike Stephy Mavididi, who converted from the spot after our Spaniard flew in. Mustapha Bundu had the pick of the chances in the first half, but decided to place the ball perfectly in Hermansen's grasp. The second half rolled round, and it was our turn to soil ourselves. A 7-minute spell saw £23 million Patson Daka notch his first of the season. Mavididi double his tally, and Wilfred and Ndidi notching their fourth to seal the victory. Joining me this week on our YouTube debut special is the pub sweepstake winner, that is Sam Down.
I don't recognise any pub sweepstake winner. I recognise a pub sweepstake loser. But yeah, delighted to be here.
I heard that you had Sunderland and you won.
Southampton, actually.
Oh, very sorry. Yeah.
Didn't realise there were two different card sheets. I assumed there was only one, hence my very embarrassing false claim of a win. But never mind that. I bought a round anyway. What can I say?
Oh, top man. He seems to have frozen, but the man with the ultra recognisable dulcet tones that are John Alsop.
Oh. Very well, thank you. A big shout out to whoever it was who recognised me as Sam vocally in the queue for the toilets at the King Power. Yeah, all good.
Why is it that we always get recognised in toilets? Is there a reason for that?
I don't know, but you might need to have a long, hard think about that.
Well, it wasn't me that got recognised.
The East Anglia flasher, Aaron Hocking.
Oh God! And the man with the stats, Ben. How's things?
Yeah, a little bit deflated after yesterday, but then I didn't have as much fun as everyone else sounds like they had after the loss. It sounds like everybody else drowned their sorrows quite convincingly. So maybe I'm the misery that's here.
Some of us drowned them before we even got to the ground, so that was good. As we've all lightly touched on, Sam, I refuse to believe that you remember a single minute of this one, so I'm going to let somebody else lead. John, on that, you had a good feeling about Saturday. Why don't you kick us off with your thoughts on that win? I mean, 4-0 loss.
Yeah, I don't know. Sam likes to have feelings about certain games where it seems very improbable that we'll get anything, and says, I just think we'll get something today. And normally I say, not going to happen. I don't know. I did just have a feeling about this one. Not necessarily about winning the game, but I thought maybe we would go there and get something. And I was really very confident indeed we'd go there and be very competitive. Just because we have been in every game this season, including against Ipswich and Leeds, who are obviously the other two sort of really good sides in the division so far this season. But also because I think Leicester, despite the points total that they have accrued, and obviously fair play to them for doing that, and maybe not quite as good as that would indicate. I certainly think that, the kind of championship pundit cognoscenti have been a little bit down on them on occasion. They haven't tended to blow too many teams away this season. So I was very confident we go there and be competitive. And for 45 minutes we were. We were right in the game. First half performance I thought was excellent. Obviously conceded a penalty very early on, which was not a great way to start the game. Sort of looked like a handball in the build up to that incident from where we were in the stands, but I think looking back at it, it was not. It probably wasn't, and then it definitely then is a foul by Pleguezuelo. So a bad way to start the game. But after that, we really came into it. I think A criticism that I had after we went to Leeds last month was that maybe we just looked a bit scared of them, a bit too respectful. Obviously, didn't have a striker on the pitch from the start that day, which didn't help matters. But we looked, I think we didn't really kind of make the most of our attacking play that day. Whereas on Saturday, we grew into the game pretty quickly. I think probably galvanized by conceding that goal, really got about Leicester, had some great passages of play. And obviously then there's that huge chance for Bundu, played in by an excellent slide rule pass from Morgan Whittaker. And he's got it completely wrong, unfortunately. I think he's probably telegraphed via his body shape, where he's going to put it. Hermansen has made a good save. Obviously, if he'd slotted that one away into the opposite corner, maybe could be talking about a very different game. But as it was, went into halftime thinking we've got a real chance here, a real chance, not only of drawing the game, but maybe winning it. And actually, Sam, as I'm sure he won't remember at all, came up to me at halftime and said,
well in it. I remember, well in it is what I said.
What you said was, that I was going to mention specifically, was we're going to win this game, not just draw it. And then, the start of the second half happened, and it was a fiasco. Obviously, the game was just... Second.
So it's Sam's fault. Sam jinxed it.
Yes, yeah, that's like most things. Just kidding. But it was obviously a terrible way to start the second half. They ran in 3 goals in very quick succession. A couple of very clinical finishes, but also some very questionable defending from us. And I think that just killed the game, basically. And I think after that, were we great? No. Made a couple of chances in and around their box. We're just very hesitant, I thought, sloppy on the ball. Not a vintage performance, at that point by any means. But, having said that, we were 4-0 down. So I don't, I think it was very clear that we just sort of, I don't want to say they gave up, because I think that would be unfair. But it certainly seemed like at 4-0, it was game over. We're just going to kind of try and get through the rest of this without incident, limit the damage a bit, and maybe try and get a goal back and just move on. So while, you could summarize this as a game of 2 halves, one excellent, one poor. The second half, I think, is hard to evaluate just because we were, again, just out of the game by the time, we really got into that half. 10 crazy minutes from our point of view defensively, but obviously their talent just showed up. And it wasn't to be our day. If my sort of hunch was going to be correct, we'd have had to have a lot of things going our way. And none of them did. So disappointing one. I certainly sort of went back and forth on feeling deflated and sort of a bit indifferent yesterday, because it wasn't one where I think is going to define our season. But certainly feeling a bit deflated today, because it does feel like it was a big occasion that we just couldn't quite rise to. But I fundamentally don't think it was a 4-0 game. I think the 4-0 doesn't accurately reflect how in the game we were for long spells. And maybe there's a bit of a sense of what might have been, but well beaten in the end, and move on to Wednesday.
Yeah, on Sam's halftime thoughts, I did actually record a voice note. I believe that was at halftime. That I'm sure I know a certain Michael Savage has asked for some Sam Down live commentary at halftime, and I think we might have to release that. I'll have to re-listen back and see what was said, see if we can back up Sam's comments of that we were going to win it. I'm not sure that was quite how it went. Ben, why don't you follow up on that? Anything to add?
Yeah, I think I agree broadly. I think that I don't know. I think Leicester were probably good for their 4 goals. I do think we were probably good for a goal. But I don't think there's much difference between sort of 3-0 and 4-2. I don't think there's much difference between, like, I definitely think we probably deserved a goal. We think we produced enough chances. Bundu obviously wastes that opportunity, but then as a team, we are, as I've banged on about, we are producing enough chances, and we are hitting the target better than anybody with the chances we produce and converting a great deal. So you can't sort of claim all of them. You can't have them all go in. We're still doing well enough in all the games as an average. And you can't say Bundu should have buried that, but then also claim the Sunderland win where Whittaker's put one in that goes in one time in 100, and Azaz has put one in that goes in one time in 17. So we didn't deserve that if you're going to go by what we did deserve from the game. You don't always get what you deserve, and we're still on average. Bundu himself, the free kick he scored against Wednesday, that doesn't always go in, and that was quite pivotal to sort of maybe start putting the game to bed, etc. So I think the frustrating thing for me yesterday was not that we were completely outdone by their class. Ironically, the fourth goal is probably the one that there's not much you can do about. The ball gets given away. I think it's Butcher, and then he doesn't get back in quick enough. And everyone else is kind of out of position, and the ball's put right in the corner. He can't do anything about that one. But the other three, I felt like there were things that could be done. I don't want to go on to anything you're going to raise later, but I think for the first three goals, definitely schoolboy mistakes made that could have averted those goals. And you don't mind being beaten when a team's just better than you. Leicester are a more expensive team with a much bigger budget, etc., wage bill. But that's not how the game's played. And if that was how games were worked out, we wouldn't bother playing the 46 games a season, would we? We play them because anybody can beat anybody on a given day. And if even though your chances are small, you want to go in, do your best, acquit yourself to your best, and then if you get beaten, fair dues. But I think we made it very easy for them. And as John said, the last couple of games Leicester have played, they've not really got out of second or third gear and actually struggled. Like West Brom, to all intents and purposes, did enough to win the game. They should have at least come away with a draw, but for some, Argyle-esque decision making and execution right at the end of that game. So, again, I don't think they really got out of third gear. We pushed them for the first half, and then we gave them some really easy. And even the concession of the first goal meant that our game plan kind of went out the window. I feel, conceding that so early meant that what the idea of stress them out, keep pressing, harry them, and then maybe get something on the break wasn't really effective, because they knew that they could recycle the ball. There was no onus to press to sort of speed the game up, to hurry the game along, because they already had the one goal each, so they could recycle at their will and do what they did twice, once for the goal and once before that as a warning in the first half, which is when Butcher was tracking the man back into sort of defence between the space. Occasionally, it was normally him, but occasionally Randall, depending on which side of the pitch it was, Daka or Mavididi, to give him a move and turn and run, and he didn't have the pace to go with them. And so they could do that all day till they had Butcher in the right spot to turn and go, and then Butcher couldn't keep up. And it's not his fault that he's slow. He's doing what he's being asked to do and is caught out. And he did quite well to patrol and pass his man on to the centre backs. But like for the long ball goal, I think was that the second? The long ball, yeah, there's a second goal, wasn't it? He passes on. The player's gone. He can't keep up with him, passes him on to Gibson, but Miller's let his man come across, just not bother tracking him. So Gibson's now got two people. He's got to let it bounce. Well, he doesn't have to let it bounce. He could just put it out for a corner. He could just put his nut on it, but he knows there's someone over his shoulder. And obviously from the last game, he knows what happens if you let the ball go inside of you. So he's kind of caught in no man's land, doesn't make a decision. And then, some schoolboy defending all around, and they just were able to capitalize because of that stupid penalty concession and take their time, and they wouldn't have been able to do that quite the same way, I don't feel, if that first goal hadn't have been scored. And I think that really turned the game more than in some ways than the stupid defending in the second and third in the second, third and fourth goals, because that the game the die had already been cast at that point.
Moving on to some social media full-time thoughts then. Lewis Walker are Maltese green. Are they Maltese if they're from Malta? Or have I just yeah, okay, cool. No, yeah. Anyway, our Maltese green who listens in, or somebody from Malta listens in anyway. He says last year Leicester were in a European semi-final against Roma. The same week we drew away to Burton Albion. Same week Leicester won the Premier League. We lost at home to Dagenham and Redbridge in League Two. I'm happy that we're here and just having a go. Joel Davis says okay.
One of Sam's all-time favourite games, the 3-2 loss at home to Dagenham, isn't it, Sam? And mine.
There are genuinely about 5 different things you could be referring to with that, and it was a memorable day.
Yeah, I feel like that was the one that was one of my nephew's first games. The 3-2. Was it 3-2? Did you say, John?
Some inspired musical accompaniment, as I remember, from a section of the Mayflower.
Oh, well,
had to be there, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think I was there, but I just don't remember it. Joel Davis says, we played okay at times. Unfortunately, the quality that they have in their squad was just too much for us. Despite the scoreline, we can be proud of the performance in general. And our friend, John, Alan Yeoman says, such a shame. The hard work we put into the first 45 was undone within 10 of the second. Bundu should have finished his chance. Can't really say much else. Expected to lose, but just suppose not in the scoreline we did. Obviously, Schuey-Roulette in full flow. 6 changes, saw the likes of Callum Wright, Matt Butcher, and Adam Randall come into the team. I'm gonna come back to you on this, on John, because I've got a question about Pleguezuelo for Sam. Obviously, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but what did you make of that initial lineup? Was there any concern, or I think if I remember rightly, you were still quietly confident after seeing that lineup, right?
Yeah, I was happy with it. I think there had been it would have been possible to imagine a world in which Shuey did sort of more wholesale changes, given that we're playing 2 teams who are, at least on paper at this moment in time, relegation rivals in the next, within the next week. QPR, I'm not sure necessarily are going to be in that position for much longer based on their current form. We'll have to wait and see how that one goes. But, I think it's obviously those games are more important than the Leicester one in terms of defining our season and where we end up. So, we could have seen a full kind of Bristol City level shake-up, which I think would have been probably very disastrous given the amount of talent Leicester have in their side. And so I think that, to see some rotation, but short of that, sort of felt like a learned lesson from that Bristol City debacle a little bit. I think in the last few weeks we've had quite a few games where we've played all of what I would consider to be our best attacking players from the start on the pitch. And I think sometimes you leave yourself, as I've said on this pod before this season, you can sometimes leave yourself with not a ton to be able to bring on in reserve. And so I kind of actually like the idea of being able to bring, Kundal and Mumba off the bench. In the end, obviously, it's just a shame that we couldn't bring them into a game situation where they were able to actually have an impact. But on a different day where we didn't concede those 3 goals, you could have imagined those players having real impacts. I guess that's a bit of a sort of Gino De Campo if my grandmother had wheels situation, because we did concede the 3 goals, and maybe people would say, well, we left players in reserve who maybe normally would start games. But I think
going back to our Leeds pod though, Gino De Campo is a Leeds fan, is he not?
I don't know actually. Anyone?
Oh, it's literally a comment that you made, but don't worry.
Oh, because of the right. Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Slow on the uptake there. Oh goodness me! I can't remember the Chino banter of a whole month ago. It's been other images coming out of the game that have dominated from the away end that have dominated social media in the last day. Let's just say. But yes. So I didn't hate the lineup at all. Obviously Randall, after scoring the winner last week, came in. I think he's someone who is easily a good enough player to start at this level, and I thought he did quite well. Ditto Butcher, obviously did have an unfortunate part to play in the 4th goal, but I don't think he did particularly badly either. And Callum Wright, I thought actually was a real bright spot for us. Someone who I think prior to his injury, when I saw him play at this level, didn't necessarily look like he was quite up to pace with it, but I thought, he went to the best team in the league on paper and his former club as well, of course, which I think probably had a big hand in him playing. Shuey, as we know, liking to play players against their former clubs. But I thought he did really well, and obviously had a chance himself where he drilled it in at the near post, and it was, I think, either saved or blocked behind. So yeah, I don't think it was a team selection that made me think, oh, we're going to go here and actually I'm going to change my feeling that we'll get something, and actually we're going to get mullered. I thought it was actually a fairly interesting and sensible selection. I think, the 2 players I would consider to be the first names on the team sheet, Whittaker and Azaz, were both in from the start. Maybe I'm sure there would have been a temptation to rest one or the other of those with Wednesday night in prospect. But we didn't. And I think, that gave us a good chance of just kind of having a magic moment out of midfield. And actually we did have one Whittaker with, again, a great ball through for Bundu, which Bundu didn't finish. So no, I didn't really have any issues with the team selection. I think it's very imaginable that we could have conceded those exact same goals with different players on the pitch. It just, there was a failure of execution ultimately on the day.
Yeah, one of the players that were on the pitch, obviously, Sam, I'll bring you in finally, 20 odd minutes in. I'm aware that
Alright.
you weren't too keen on Pleguezuelo anyway. In my opinion, it's not really a penalty. It's more he's stupidly given the ref a decision to make. But I can't imagine that performance has given you any reason to change your mind on him.
No, not really. I think it is a penalty, to be honest with you. I think he catches him, doesn't win the ball. Not only that, but the second goal, he's just wildly out of position. He's pressing about 10 to 15 yards higher up than the rest of the defensive line. The long ball pretty much goes into the hole where he should be, but isn't. I think he once or twice before was playing a defensive line of his own that thankfully didn't result in a goal. They just didn't quite get the right pass over the top. But if you do it enough, it's going to eventually go wrong. And look, I really, really want him to work out for us. I think I said when he signed, the fact that we signed a player who was playing fairly regularly for a team that came 5th or 6th in the Eredivisie, that was on paper one of the best signings we've ever made in terms of pedigree coming to Argyle.
Sorry?
Eredivisie. The Dutch league. The Dutch league. I thought that he was one of the best signings we've ever made on paper, but it just hasn't turned out that way. I think he's been really prone to mistakes. I think he's playing the game at a slower tempo than everyone else is playing it. I think the Dutch league is probably better than the Championship technically, but it's much lower tempo. And he's not got up to pace at all. The Dutch league being a slow league as it is, he's getting absolutely roasted for pace. He's thinking he has more time to track back. I really hate ever using the word lazy to describe players, and I genuinely don't think he is lazy, but I think his body movement is very languid. He doesn't have that dynamic turn of pace. One thing he is very good at is playing out from the back, for sure, but even that he didn't do particularly well yesterday. Would I love to see him turn it around and prove me wrong? Absolutely would, but I think right now he's been probably our least successful signing of the summer so far, certainly of the permanent players. Obviously, Lewis Warrington has just not been good enough to get anywhere near the team. But yeah, I do have concerns, and I would absolutely have Dan Scarr back in for the game at QPR on Wednesday. Not that I think he's had a brilliant season. He's had a very up and down season, but I think, unfortunately, the minute Pleguezuelo is being a bit of a liability at the moment, if I'm brutally honest, and costing far more than he brings to the team.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because I was looking at the data on Gibson, Pleguezuelo, and Scarr, because I've been seeing a lot that Pleguezuelo passes a lot better than Scarr, but to my eye, Scarr, sorry, he passes quite well, except for when he's under pressure. And Scar's passing stats are all better than Pleguezuelo's over a 90 period, and and that's across short, medium, and long. Medium is basically the same in terms of percentage of completion, but long balls and short balls, Scarr is completing a higher percentage than Pleguezuelo, and it's not there's a massive disparity in numbers. Scar's actually playing more passes, but it's not to a point where one is playing so many more than the others that it skews the figures. So this idea that sort of Pleguezuelo is ball playing sort of Beckenbauer in comparison to Scarr is a little bit misleading, I think. And I think where the big difference to my eye, and Scarr actually looking at the stats, Scarr can carry the ball a lot better than I imagined, but Pleguezuelo and Gibson are much better at doing it further up the pitch or getting out from the back with the ball and moving it. And that's Scarr's. I think he panics a little bit. Hasn't got the feet necessarily to dance past a man when necessary. And I think Pleguezuelo's done that really well a few times, been caught in the corner. I remember one game, I was sat in the Lyndhurst block 16, so I can't remember which game that was. But there's one game where he sort of did a little pirouette in the corner and sold his man and came away with the ball. And Scarr doesn't do that. And we sort of see when he gave away the penalty against Borough, sometimes under pressure, he struggles. And Pleguezuelo does have a lot more poise or sort of composure on the ball compared to Scarr. And that, I think, sometimes can trick the eye, because a lot of passes Scarr plays are really good. And Pleguezuelo yesterday was, for the first goal, the penalty, he dangles a leg needlessly and the player chooses to go over it. Why wouldn't he? It's a penalty, there's contact made. You can't argue with that. The second goal, I actually think he was pressing up on Dewsbury Hall to not give him room to be able to turn, which is why he's sort of out of the back line. Now, whether that's because he's chosen to do that or whether that was a game plan like against Bellingham against Sunderland, to sort of use him as that kind of to step out and do that, I don't know. But certainly when the ball goes over his head, he just jogs back. He doesn't, Edward sort of overtakes him on the way back. And if he'd bust a gut, he could have, well, even if he wouldn't have had more influence, you want to see the effort put in to chase back. And then for the third goal, I think it's Mavididi steps inside him and he just sort of dangles a leg backwards, just like I sort of do at five-a-side. It's just you've got skin and you just token leg out just to. Then he comes inside and Randall's doing his best. He picks up the man, tries to dance, and then as the shot gets taken, Randall sort of dives in front of it, and Pleguezuelo just doesn't do anything. If he'd dived as well, he had a much better chance because of time to get down in front of the ball and block it. And it just seemed really, like Sam said, you don't want to ever call a player lazy because that's really offensive to someone who's doing their job. But there did seem to be a real lack of dynamism, maybe you want to call it that. Like you really sort of, there was no, I don't want to say, I can't pick a word other than effort, but there wasn't that sort of sense of body on the line from him at all yesterday.
Urgency, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way. There wasn't that sort of sense of urgency of like, this needs to be done now. This isn't like just that dangling that leg for the penalty was just, where did that thought process come from? It was so casual. And he has been good in games, but yesterday particularly, you do have to pick up. He was probably culpable in the first 3 goals, at least in part. I'm not saying, that if he'd done any of those things differently, the goals wouldn't have happened. But to the eye, you think you want to see a little bit more commitment in each of those situations. Sorry to have jumped in on the end of that, but
no, that's fine. I've got a question later on about basic defensive capabilities. You've already mentioned, Ben, your exploits at five-a-side. There was a moment around the 30th minute, John, where I came to you after your wonder goal on Friday or whenever it was you were telling us about the pub, which I'm sure you'll share with everybody, which you really should. There was a moment where I turned to you. I think it was like 30th minute in. I said that chance by Mustapha Bundu, you would have taken that. Surely you have to be doing better with that. That is. And on that, if that goes in, does that change that game at all, or do you think Leicester would still have had the quality to just steamroller us?
Well, firstly, I think I would have missed that chance because my sort of normal vibe at five-a-side eight-a-side, I should say, in recent weeks has been scoring sort of high XG screamers, but missing open.
You're more of the Morgan Whittaker than the Ryan Hardy.
Yeah, I know. I certainly wouldn't offend either of those people by comparing myself to them, but yes, I think it's a really bad finish. I mean, Ben makes the fair point about kind of different chances sort of evening themselves out over time, and you can't maybe complain about missing an easy one after a number of games in quick succession where we've had amazing strikes flying into the top corner, just intensely clinical finishing from kind of around the edge of the box. But that being said, it doesn't excuse the miss. I think Ryan Hardy in peak form, you would absolutely back him to score there. I think even Ryan Hardy in a bit of a goal drought, because we know he does go through periods where he scores a lot of goals and periods where he doesn't. I think even in a sort of relative drought for him, you'd back him to put that one away. I think the finish that, it seemed like there was a wide space open down to the keeper's right, and really all that the player had to do, whoever was taking the shot, had to just sort of roll it to that side of the keeper rather than try and beat him at the near post, which was, even if the finish had been much better executed, obviously it gives the keeper more of a chance because of the angle. And it was a very tame effort in the end. I think he also snatched it. I think he had a bit more time to set himself, take another touch, and maybe even go around the keeper if he wanted to do that. So I think it is a really bad miss. And I do think it would have changed the game. I think I may have mentioned on the podcast after the Leeds game that I sort of felt they didn't really ever get into a particularly high gear against us. And I sort of felt that even if things had gone a bit differently in that game in terms of the order in which they happened, I'd always have sort of backed Leeds to score, those 2 goals at some point in the game, even if we had not, just sort of given them 2 very clumsy ones. But yes, where was I? Completely lost my train of thought. No, I think you always would have backed Leeds to get the goals to win that game. I think they were always going to do what was necessary to win the game, and they scored 2 goals early on and sort of played at exhibition match pace for the rest of the game. I don't feel yesterday was like that. I completely agree with Ben that Leicester didn't get out of a sort of didn't get into a particularly high gear, but I also didn't feel that was because they didn't want to. It just felt to me like they were very disjointed as a team, honestly, which I think is a reflection that quite a lot of people have had watching them this season. I don't think they're a team. I don't think they're as good as Leeds for starters. I think Leeds are very clearly, to me, the best team that we've played in the division on their day. Obviously, they have consistency and some defensive issues. Leicester are clearly a very solid team and they have unbelievable individual quality going forward. But that is ultimately what happened yesterday, right? It was individual quality that did us. And, rather than any sort of outstanding team play, as I see it. And so I think if that chance had gone in from Bundu, I think we were really in the ascendancy at that point. I think that would have galvanized us further. And I think we've had a great chance of going on to score again. I sort of find it a bit hard to believe we would have gone 90 minutes and not conceded a second or maybe even a third goal, just because, again, they had that individual quality and we were a bit ropey defensively. But if we'd scored that goal from Bundu, I think, the floodgates could have opened at our end as well, and it could have turned into sort of a ding-dong 3-all, 4-3 either way type of game. To me, it really did feel like a decisive sort of pivot moment in the game. Rather than sort of if we'd have scored that, they'd have just gone and done exactly what they did, and it would have been 4-1 rather than 4-0. I think it would have meaningfully changed things for sure.
Taking that first half in isolation, then I assume we should give ourselves some credit, I suppose, right, in the fact that Andy Davis of the once of the end of pod quiz fame. Once literally tweeted it saying that it was the best 45 all season. He since clarified to me on a phone call at about 2 a.m. this morning when my train rolled in that he meant away from home. Sam, do you agree with that? I don't.
No, I don't think I do. It was a good first 45 from what I remember of it. No, it was a good. We had the Bundu chance, we had the Callum Wright chance as well, and we had quite a bit of good play at the edge of the area. So yeah, look, first 45 was good, no arguments. I think the first 45 at Hull might have been better. We went 1-0 up, really should have been 2-0 up. I think the second half at Preston was better. We really hammered away at them there and just didn't quite get the equaliser. I think the second half at Watford was better. We had a really good run of play there. Randall again missed a chance that should have won us the game, or could have won us the game at the very least. So no, I wouldn't say it was the best 45 away from home. I think it was one of the better 45s away from home, for sure. But then that's really not an incredibly high bar, is it, with our away form this season? So yeah, it was a good first half.
You missed the first half at Ipswich, which I think was the best of the lot.
Yeah, no, I did forget that one. You're right. The first half at Ipswich was actually exceptional. I think that is in close contention with the second half at Preston for the best half of the lot. I would agree.
I'd even suggest the second half at Birmingham was better than the first 45. Amongst all the ones that have been listed. So we've not actually been too bad. It's 90 minutes, putting 90 minutes together, I think, is our issue as much as anything else.
First half of West Brom is actually another one that's come to mind. That was another really good half. So I wouldn't say that, but I think that does actually almost accidentally shine upon quite a good point there that Ben's just made, which we have for a team that's not gone away. That's a lot of games we've listed where we've had at least one good half. In fact, I think we've probably listed there every game apart from Coventry and Bristol City, in fact, haven't we? I think every other one we have, in fact, listed there. And Leeds actually being the third one. But apart from those 3 games, all of our other away performances have had at least one good half, which, yeah, just again, a little bit of consistency, bit of know-how, bit of quality. I think we will win an away game this season. I found out an interesting stat the other day, courtesy of Dan Allard's regular appearance on this podcast, that in the Tony Waiters season after being promoted to this league, very long time ago, I know, we came 16th, so we stayed up quite comfortably. but it was depend on extraordinary home form. And actually, we didn't win an away game that entire season. I think we drew something like we drew about 10 and lost about 13, and just had incredible home form that kept us up comfortably, which is eerily similar to this season for a first season after being promoted to the second tier. So I wonder if it could be a similar season to that again, with maybe a similar outcome. And it would be a very depressing few trips to come if we don't win away from home all season, but I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, it's happened before.
Yeah, 2 points there. I think the first one is the stat that I like to roll out a lot. Is obviously it's now been a whole calendar year without a Saturday 3 p.m. away win, which is quite fun.
Well, that's 14 months. Yeah, this whole calendar year and the last 2 months of 2022.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, and then basically the only other thing I was going to say is obviously that first 45 against Ipswich yesterday after Bundu was through. It made me question the rage in which I had at the referee at Ipswich, because he was guaranteed to score, because in hindsight, I don't think he was. But anyway, second half rolls round and 7 minutes is all it takes for Leicester to stretch the lead from 1 to 4. Two sort of questions, I suppose. How much credit do we need to give Leicester for coming out all guns blazing in that second half? And the second bit is, how long is it going to take us to get the basics of defending right, John?
Well, we have got the basics of defending right in a number of games this season. And I believe, I don't know where this stands based on yesterday, but I think I wasn't there, but heard a report from one of the recent fans, the recent fans forum. And I think someone made a comment to the panelists about our defensive record, and I'm doing this purely on memory, so I could have bungled who said this and what the actual stat was. But I think Jusenip turned around and said something along the lines of, actually, our defense is only the 8th or 9th worst in the league at that point. And actually, I think one of the points he made was that Preston, to that point, had a worse defensive record than us, even though at the beginning of the season they were not conceding goals. They looked very tight, well organised. So, yeah, obviously conceding 4 yesterday would have knocked us a bit back down the standings. But I don't think we're as bad defensively as, the sort of suggestion that we've got this elite attack, but our defense is absolutely terrible. I don't think that's really true at all. And actually, in all of those away games that we just ran through, it's only Bristol City and yesterday where we've taken a hiding. And one of those was, in my opinion, effectively self-inflicted. And yesterday, as I said, coming out of the stadium, we're up against players whose finger in some cases is probably worth more than our entire squad, or certainly a limb would be worth more than our entire squad. And sometimes you just can't legislate for being up against that quality. So do they deserve credit? I mean, yeah. I don't think it's like they came out and absolutely blitzed us, in the sense of you sort of felt like they were laying siege to our goal and it was all hands on deck back there. It very much just felt like they came forward 3 times, put the ball in the back of the net 3 times. And that was that. You obviously have to give them credit for scoring the goals. Clearly, they've got some unbelievable quality in those forward areas. I mean, that team yesterday, with the exception of Mavididi, who scored twice and was kind of arguably their star man on the day, Winks and the keeper and Fatawu, the other winger, was, I think I'm right in saying, the team they had in the Premier League last season, basically. And that was without Iheanacho, Vardy, Ricardo Pereira, who have obviously all been mainstays of the team this season as well. So this is a team that, by and large was probably on paper too good to go down from the Premier League last season, which they have then, I think, strengthened with a few additions who definitely will be playing for them in the Premier League next season, I would imagine, if unless something very drastic happens, that's where they're going to be. So, give them credit, I guess, is a bit of a difficult one. I mean, credit to them, I guess, for having a load of money and accidentally having ended up in the Championship because of a disastrous season that probably should have been avoided. I mean, I don't know if credit is the right word for that, but certainly it was their quality, yes, that tore us apart. Yeah, our defending was poor. I think Ben has already been through that. Sam as well, talking about Pleguezuelo. I just to add my 2 cents on that, personally, I think Sam is being a bit harsh, but certainly I wouldn't disagree with the particulars about his performance yesterday, which I thought was really poor. But yeah, it's I don't think yesterday is the exhibit number 1 that I would hold up as evidence that we are an atrocious side defensively that can't do the basics correctly at all. I don't think it's a game that's going to have a great deal of bearing on the rest of the season, to be completely honest with you. And yeah, I guess I would be loath to extrapolate kind of sweeping conclusions from that about our defensive ability.
I was going to say several things can be true, that they did play well, but at the same time, we didn't defend well. Mikel Miller, I think, is a really good player, but he's not a fullback. And there were times. So we talk about, if Bundu had scored. Well, before that, Ndidi had been put, was it Mavididi? And I think it was Ndidi had been put through over the top again. And he was 1-on-1 basically. And yes, I think someone came back and sort of put him off right at the end, but he could have buried that. And then it would have been 2-0 before we even got to the Bundu miss, which again, it's all speculation, but then sort of you think that would sort of give everyone a wake up call, but then sort of literally 30, 45, 60 seconds later, there's a man completely free at the back post because Miller's just not watched him, not gone with him, and Cooper's made a great point blank save. So again, could have been 2-0, space of a minute, and Miller's defensive performance yesterday. Yeah, and you can't blame him. What I was trying to get at here is we've got the players we've got the squad we've got. Early, I think I mentioned it on the pod before. I think would have had that spot nailed down to a certain degree, and I think we had to rest certain players. I think Mumba was getting a rest for the 2 games coming up, and Miller's needs to get fit, get game minutes as he's coming back from injury. So these things have to happen. We only have the squad we have, and it's all well and good saying Butcher could have done better here, or Miller could have done better here. But Miller's, he's a winger at being asked to play fullback in the Championship. So there's got to be a, did he play badly? Did we play badly defensively? Yes, at times we did, and we were punished by extremely good players, as John said. These are just, these things don't have to be. Both of these things can be true. That we didn't play well, but what more do we expect from a guy who's doing his best to. He always has got that yellow card in him, hasn't he? It's like I think that is a little bit of indiscipline, and there's things he could improve. But yeah, I mean, you can point the finger at Pleggy and Miller yesterday maybe and say there's clear errors here, but we are the squad we are, and there will be days when, as John has alluded to, in these matchups where you're going to have the perfect day to not be exploited. So, what I'm trying to get at is our best defensively, or as well as we can expect to do defensively, isn't necessarily always going to be good enough. And I think sometimes we have played about as well as you can expect us to, and sometimes kept a clean sheet and sometimes not. But you can expect us to, do better than we can do. Our squad's best is going to be our squad's best, wherever it is. We've got 3 centre backs really that we think of that we're using at the minute, and 2 of them are probably in one way or another not up to. I think both Scar and Plaggy can perhaps learn and develop a sort of throughout the season. But at the minute, we would probably I'd suggest say that one of Gibson's a Championship quality centre back, and the other 2 are lacking in different areas. So you can't expect people to give more than they can give. If you drop one of us in, we could do our best, and it's just not going to be good enough. So we have to be careful about demanding more than players can give, but also acknowledging that there are limitations to what they're going to be able to give if they give their best. And that's the frustrating thing about yesterday, is that if there had been that attention to detail, if there had been the urgency, I think, for the full 90 minutes, then there was the potential to get something out of that game, as opposed to Leeds, where you do feel they could have turned the screw at any point, and we could have made them regret not doing it, and that's on them and their discipline. That's their problem. But I think yesterday, that's the frustrating thing, is that if we'd done what we know those players have been capable of doing, there was the opportunity to get something out of the game. So yeah, I think we could do with a centre back and a sort of dynamic midfielder. They're not probably going to come in, given the statements that have been made and probably going on. But the squad is what the squad is. So long as we get the best that they can offer us, I think we'll all be happy. I think that the dissatisfaction comes when they're not giving what they're capable of. We know they're not going to be equivalent to the best players that we're seeing week in, week out against us. But they need to be reaching a level that they can achieve.
Yeah, John, I don't see ref watch being a large one? Do you want it, or should we just move on?
I do want it, actually, because I thought the referee was quietly very poor yesterday.
Charlatan and a fraud.
No, I certainly wouldn't say that, and I want to be clear that that's Aaron's opinion, not mine. For when the lawyers come knocking for Mr. whatever his name was of whatever county he's from, as Joe would say. But I thought it's not one where he's got any decisions horribly wrong that have sort of affected the whole course of the game. It's not the case that there was an Ipswich style howler of a decision where if it had gone our way, we'd have. It would have been a completely different game. Obviously, we've had a little bit of a debate about the penalty, but I think the consensus outside of Aaron is that it was, or at least he's given the referee an excuse to make that decision. But I sort of felt on the whole, just as in terms of like the sort of normal flow of the game, that he really gave every opportunity he got to give them a decision. It was sort of maximally taken. And I didn't think that the same applied to us. I think every single yellow card worthy offence that there was, we got booked for instantly, and then they had a couple where I felt their player got away with something that was just as bad. One where you could conceivably make an argument that in isolation you can show leniency in that case, but I don't think the same leniency was shown to us. So for me, Shuey made comments after the game, and he was actually referring to the potential handball incident in the run-up to the penalty. He said, when you come to big places like this, you don't get those decisions. We're clearly not getting those decisions at the moment. I don't agree with him on this occasion about that particular incident, I don't think. But I think that logic kind of applies to the referee's performance on the whole. I think it was another one where, the referee was not... I didn't think treated the two sides particularly even-handedly, but that was just the way I saw it. But certainly I wouldn't suggest the referee change the game or anything like that.
Yeah, the EFL's website says that Sonny Gills County is unknown, although he became the first British South Asian to referee an EFL fixture since his dad. When was this? In March this year. So no county. So I can't even do a little county quiz. A couple of questions then. Cornish Pilot says, can we survive in this league purely on home form? Sam, you've basically already answered that in the fact that we've done it before, but do you see it possible this year?
Yeah, because I think that the home form has been so excellent for such a long time now under Schumacher and Lowe before him. In the 21-22 season, we were a lot better at home than we were away. Last season, we won 20 out of 23 home games in the league. I think it's just the most utterly extraordinary record. I don't want to say this is a definite stat because I don't have it to hand, but I look back through many previous seasons of teams who got massively high points totals, like Reading's 106 points, Wolves getting 103 points, and so on and so forth. Not ever before did I find an example of a team who'd won 20 out of 23 home games. So, yeah, look, whilst there may not be a load of reasons for thinking our away form is going to drastically improve, I'm sure it will improve somewhat. If even getting one win would all of a sudden, even if we win on Wednesday, we'll double our entire away points total so far this season. So, look, I'm sure it will improve a little bit, the away form. Will it improve markedly? Probably not. But also, I don't think the home form will decline significantly either. So, yeah, I think we've pretty much stayed at in terms of points per game, and we've stayed at a pretty much a rolling average of just over a point a game for most of the season so far, which would land us in sort of 47 to 50 point region, which would be enough to stay up most probably. So, look, I think it will be tight. I've never have I ever agreed with any of the people who said I think we're going to stay up comfortably, apart from maybe after the first game or two. I might have said that when we were very good against Huddersfield and Watford, but I've always said this is going to be a relegation fight. I will think we will be going into the last two games, maybe even going into the final day of squeaky bum time. I've said that for a while and I stand by it, but we've got enough to stay up for sure. If we can just, improve a little bit, have a good January, I think we will stay up. But even if we carry on pretty much exactly as we are, that may well also be enough to stay up.
I think there's a little bit of an open question, and I have a horrible feeling I'm going to preempt something Aaron was going to introduce later, which means that for the first time, our YouTube viewers get to see Aaron silently swearing into the camera on mute as I say this, but regular pod guest Joe Bell was pointing this out to us earlier, which was to say that actually, Joe Bell of Devonshire, our away form has been bad, obviously, but probably looks worse than it is. And part of the reason for that is the teams that we've played away. We've had already to go to the top 3 sides in the league. We have gone to Hull. We've gone to West Brom, so and Aaron's now doing the face for those of you still listening on the traditional podcast platforms. But yeah, that's a tough run of away games. Whereas our home games, we've had some tough ones, but we've also played Huddersfield, Sheffield Wednesday, Stoke at home already, as well as Norwich, who of course were flying quite high when we played them, but have since been on an absolutely horrendous run of form. So. I'm sure there's a couple of others I'm forgetting in there as well. So I guess part of the question is, it would appear that Sam's analysis is correct, that, we are just a really, really good side at home, and that will probably continue to be the case. And our away form will probably continue to be far from stellar. But, I think there's always a chance, actually, that you could see something of an inversion in the second half of the season. It could be that actually we're quite efficient about picking up points against teams where you'd expect it, or you'd expect us to be competitive, whereas we're finding that these games against the really top sides in the league are just a bridge too far for us. That there could be, and it could be an element of both, right? I'm sure I think obviously there are natural advantages to playing at home. We're clearly very confident there, but it could also be a question of the caliber of opposition as well. So it'll be interesting to see, once we've had the opportunity to go to some of these sides who are down there with us, including of course on Wednesday night. Although again, I think we're playing QPR at a very bad time, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a not at all separate podcast that will be definitely not being released on the same day as this one. Will we get the same amount of points at home when the opposition are we're welcoming Leeds, we're welcoming Leicester, we're welcoming Ipswich? Possibly. I can already tell you I've got a hunch several months in advance that we're going to beat Ipswich at home. I just have a feeling about it. But and maybe we'll surprise a couple of those other big boys as well. It's certainly possible. But I guess for me, based on sort of drawing on Joe's comment about the caliber of teams we've had to play away from home, you could imagine a situation where we start picking up a few wins on the road and start then being slightly less reliable at home, but where it sort of averages out at about the same level as where we are currently. I think I would not discount that possibility and just assume that we're going to continue to go gangbusters at home. I think on home form we're sort of a playoff team, right? Basically, or very much in and around the playoffs.
Seventh.
And almost rock bottom on away form, ahead only of Rotherham, I think. So, so I'll have to wait and see. But I certainly think. I've got a couple of tasty-looking home games coming up, so it'll probably be a little while before any sort of inversion starts to happen there, I would imagine.
I think as well you have to mention the fact that, whether our home form will keep us up or not, the changes in manager and form amongst some of the other teams at the bottom. I think a lot of us were a lot more casual a few weeks ago when QPR, along with Wednesday and Rotherham, were stinking the gaff up. Whereas now it just seems to be Rotherham that are in the doldrums, and Wednesday, and particularly QPR, who always had a decent squad, and you wonder what Ainsworth was doing with it. Seem to be picking up points as well as form, not just spawny results. So I think whereas normally the Championship is you've got a couple of great teams at the top, and then you've got a real compression in the middle, and a few teams cut adrift. The way Stoke have been falling, Birmingham have been falling, you might end up with that compression in the mid. It's like almost having like a bottom half of the table almost, where it could be for the neutral a really exciting end the second half of the season. We're almost halfway through, aren't we? It could be really exciting, not for us if we're in it, but a real dogfight between 8 or more teams potentially. And as has been, I think John's spoken before about hitting runs of form. I think it was John. Someone here talked about, you hit a patch of 3 wins and, that's great. You've got 9 points, then you can worry about it later. But I do, I know I'm going on and I only wanted to add a little addendum, but I do think that whether our home form will be enough, if we don't see a shift that John suggests, then we might. If things carry on the same trend, we'll rely a lot on how the teams in and around us are going to do now that their circumstances have changed, because some of those performances have looked, even Wednesday against us in the early days of that sort of appointment, look very different from what we've seen before. So it could be, you know, and it's worth mentioning now on this pod at this time, because we've just started seeing the change of that. It might drop off. It might drop off rather than, you know, the new manager bounce might go. But that I think is as much as important as what we do. You know, if you've got a bunch of teams all down there sort of on high 40s, 50 points, that's going to make it a lot more difficult than, obviously, I know that's stupid to say, but, you know, that will have a big impact. And I think possibly psychologically affect the way we play going forward as much as the manager's philosophy. I'm sure we've talked before, do we have to try and do something different away from home and change tactics and style? Well, might be dictated as much, not just by our results, but by others.
I do think, though, that if we can stay just slightly ahead of a point per game on average, quite consistently over the course of the season, that will probably be fine. Maybe even a point per game will be fine. I was certainly thinking that it would be until, as Ben has discussed a couple of weeks ago, and obviously now you do have a concerning uptick in form for QPR, although I think QPR were in a self-inflicted false position, and it would not be a surprise to see them become a team that we're not really talking about as relegation contenders. But Huddersfield are really hanging in there quite impressively. As Ben mentioned, Sheffield Wednesday are on an uptick of form. It's going to be a very hard uphill climb for them, even so. But they're starting to approach base camp, I guess, in that metaphor. Rotherham look very, very poor indeed, but they've not got their new manager in yet, so there could possibly be a new manager bounce coming for them as well. I think it's supposed to be Liam Richardson is the latest name linked with that one. They've obviously had some a hard time filling that job, it would seem. But but that being said, I think just staying slightly ahead of a point per game, I think certainly, well, not certainly, I would be surprised if that wasn't enough. If you look at the championship relegation points totals over the last 10 to 15 years, I mean, Dan Ellard did an analysis for us earlier in the season. I think on this, it would be enough, in the vast majority of seasons to stay up. And at the moment, we are staying ahead of that. Having got those 2 wins in our last 4 games, that's really given us a little bit of padding, above that as an average rate. So hopefully we can pick up quite a few more points this month with some of the more favourable fixtures that we have, at least on paper, and just sort of keep ourselves ahead of that benchmark. And I certainly don't think, just to finish on this point quickly, I certainly don't think that an improvement among those teams who look dead and buried has to mean that we're the ones that they're going to catch necessarily. I think Birmingham, for example, are in real trouble unless they make a managerial change, which they might, but also, they've clearly brought in Rudy for non-footballing reasons, at least in part. So it would be very surprising to me if they threw him overboard, before March or April. And I think they'd have to be really, really seriously in the mud before they consider doing it. But they might be. At the moment, they've got, I think, 5 points under him, and 4 of those have been at home to Sheffield Wednesday and Rotherham, who are the 2 worst sides in the league to this point. So, massively jinxing it for our game against them in a couple of weeks, I'm sure now, but they look absolutely terrible. And I don't see where the improvement is for them, to be honest. So I don't think, they're one who are going to click into gear and everything's going to go right for them. It seems like a very toxic place. Stoke sacked their manager today. I happen to think Stoke are a basket case of a club at the moment. And, I don't think they're one where you can necessarily count on a new manager bounce, because I think, as I've been discussing with Sam offline in recent weeks, Alex Neil is actually a very good manager, in my opinion. I think they've had other very good managers in there, in recent years, who just haven't been able to get them out of the doldrums. There seems to be something very toxic in the atmosphere at that club at the moment. So I don't think it's quite as simple as saying let's just stay ahead of those teams that have been in the bottom 3 to this point, and let's all panic if we fail to beat QPR on Wednesday night or even lose that game. I think, there's going to be more teams in the conversation than just those, which, as Ben said, yes, is going to make for potentially very exciting viewing for the neutral. But I think we'll have the benefit for us that it's, not necessarily a case of us just having to sort of look at the results of 2 or 3 teams. It might become a much broader based scrap than that.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to do a separate QPR preview pod, but I've got quite a bit I want to get through, so I feel like we will. Is there anything you guys want to add on the Leicester game before we definitely...
Just a bit of a weird one. I don't get why, when we're so keen on managing his minutes, why he brought on Galloway at 4-0 down. It wasn't going to change the game at all. We want to, after a good performance he put in against Stoke, I think we want to keep him for Wednesday night and wrap him up in cotton wool, and it just seems such an unnecessary risk to bring on such an injury-prone player into a game situation where the game was already dead. So, no idea why he did that. Confusing decision. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention it because it did take me by surprise.
Yeah, obviously, I don't know why games like that. Obviously, I don't really keep up to date with the academy side. I know they played in the week against Palace, but I just don't know why we're not chucking on the likes of Osaka and getting them minutes. Like you're 4-0 down, doesn't really matter.
Yeah, but he's got to be on the bench to get off the bench,
That's
hasn't he?
I'm saying, I don't know why.
Osaka was cramping up quite bad towards the end of the FA Cup
Oh,
game.
okay. Well, there you go.
Well, I imagine it was just a case of.
But not only that, but like I feel, and as much as a great prospect as Saka is he in our best 9 subs after the first 11? Probably not. So I feel that even if the youth were not playing,
you're saying about wrapping players up in cotton wool, and you just don't name the injury-prone ones in this lineup. But maybe that's defeatist of me. But yeah,
maybe.
Okay.
I'll quickly add that I thought tactically it was interesting. It didn't work necessarily, but it wasn't the same, but it was reminiscent of the game plan against Norwich, where you sort of had certain men marking men, but they were marking the space of them that was being created because the way Leicester move the ball around is to manipulate your setup. So you sort of had Butcher sort of man marking the Daka or Mavididi, whoever was sort of dropping to pull someone. They're like, okay, well, if you want to drop and pull us out of position, then we'll give you a man that will do that. And Butcher didn't necessarily have the speed to do that particularly well, or at least he didn't leave the gap leave the cushion he needed to make it work every time. You can't blame him playing against people who are just faster and cleverer, Premier League players, both of those really. But it's great to see whether it's all Schumacher or it's part Dewsnip and part Schumacher. I do sort of think that Schumacher is a great coach, and these sort of things get overlooked. When you get tonked 4-0, we look at maybe the players and the performances, and it's boring to look at sort of the nitty gritty perhaps of players' roles. But I do think there's a lot to, and he said himself he's made loads of mistakes this season. He's learning heaps, really developing. So keeping hold of Shuey and letting him develop. And yes, of course, we don't want to just make mistakes and be because he can move on. He could relegate us and then get offered a job somewhere nice and wave ta-ra. So I'm not, but he is doing a really great job. I think that if it wasn't for a lot of the nous that gets put into the setup and the game plans, we'd be a lot worse off than we are. Because that's the sort of thing that makes the difference. The coaching and the game plans, that's what turns a squad with a wage bill of what it is, with the value that it has to be able to compete in this league. Because without that nous and without that sort of expertise and that craft, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now. And there's we have to doff our cap when when it goes right, like Norwich. Everybody talks about what a great game that was and what a masterstroke. And on another day, it might have a similar effect might have happened. We might have got a point or snatched something that we maybe didn't deserve. But I do think that a lot of Shuey's good work sometimes goes under the radar when we're looking at such exciting, dynamic football when we're attacking, and then maybe leaky defenses again that irritate us. Because those are they're kind of the quintessentially, aren't they? The things that fans get absorbed in. But just wanted to sort of say that Shuey's doing great work, I think, this season, and the rest of the staff behind whoever comes up with it, with sort of like the game plans and does the analysis. That's going to be, I think, as important to our success this season as anything else. So yeah, just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, I was basically going to save this for the QPR preview pod. But does there become a point where we start to question Schumacher's tactics away from home? Like, I know there's a lot of people are questioning whether we, Connor asked, what do we think is the reason behind our poor away form? Is it something that we can easily recover from? As Stephen Lee has asked, is it time for a back five away from home, and we need to start getting something away? Richard Sloman says, is it time to start the 3 at the back at away games? Charlie says, I don't care too much purely because we were still on a League One title charge, and I didn't really think about the away games, but surely now we have to start asking questions about Shuey's tactics and how he sets up away from home. Is that obviously, I'm a massive Shuey fan and I love the bloke, but at what point do we have to start questioning the setup away from home? I appreciate obviously yesterday isn't maybe a good sample size to start that critique, but
yeah, I just think it's time. The old quote commonly attributed to Einstein, if it actually was Einstein, is that the definition of idiocy is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And I think whoever it was who first said that quote, it's very applicable to ourselves at the moment. So I think we have
the football or the pod.
the football. No, I think we have to do something different. Whether that's just going back to three at the back, whether it's having a more explicitly sit deep and hit them on the counter formation. I know that doesn't always work because, to use another idiom, everyone always has a plan until you get hit in the face, and we got hit in the face quite early in the game yesterday. So it wouldn't be guaranteed to work, and it wouldn't, mean we'd start winning every week. But I do think that we need to just change it up a bit defensively, because I think what Shuey said after the game at Barnsley last season is that we're just not getting the same outcomes away as at home, so we need to go to a slightly more defensive style. I just think we absolutely need to do the same thing here. For the QPR game, they're on good form. They're trying to play some possession football under their new manager. I think we go back to 3-4-3, but have the wing backs basically full backs, so just have 5 defenders and just put the emphasis on not conceding. And if we can just hit them on the break and get a fluky goal, or if we can just have a great counter attack that exploits a gap in their defence when they're pushing forward, all the better for it. But I think we just cannot keep on trying to play our normal game away from home. We've got to go to a defensive counter-attacking style, in my view.
Worth noting, by the way, that after Shuey made those comments after Barnsley away, we won every single away game after that point to the end of the season. I think 5 away games, we won every single one. So,
well, if he can come out with something like that now, then, and we could win all of our away games to the end of the season, that'd be absolutely fantastic.
Well, I think also that was partially, though, a question of we'd had a very tough away run to that point, and then the final 5 away games were against teams who were, if I remember correctly, either in the relegation mix or kind of lower mid-table. So, I think that's part of it, but he also is a manager who is adaptable. And I think we discussed this much earlier in the season, actually. I think I did say it wouldn't surprise me if he sort of gives it till Christmas on the away form, kind of trying to play the way that we want to. And if it doesn't work, maybe he'll sort of reevaluate then. And, we've had some close calls away, right? We've had some games where if Hull and West Brom was sort of the width of a post from taking what would have been a 2-0 and a 1-0 lead in those games. Ipswich is a game we absolutely should have won when we were robbed blind by the referee. So, again, I think the form sort of looks very bad on paper, but it's a bit deceptive for a number of reasons. I don't think we've been that bad away from home. And so, yeah, I wouldn't surprise me if Shuey is looking at this, constantly reevaluating it and just going, we're not quite there yet where we need to sort of like really make compromises to our playing style. But I think that day will be coming. And last season he proved that when he does make that decision and make that change, that it does work, or it has the capacity to work. So I'm not too concerned about it at this point in time.
Yeah, I think John's hit the nail on the head with the suggestion that he's tantalizingly close at times. We've had some away performances where you just, Ipswich is the obvious one, but there's been so many where you think, oh, it's almost there. So his inclination might well be like, well, if we just keep going, then it'll finally click. It can't keep going wrong. We are doing well. And we've talked about having good 45 minutes. How many good 45 minutes did we just list off earlier in the pod where, it's done all right? But the other thing is, does he have the personnel to play the 3 at the back, or whatever sort of he might think this would work brilliantly? I can see what our problem is away. We need to do this, but do we have the personnel available, fit, and sort of practiced in that formation? Because it's not just about, even if we've got the personnel to do it, you've got to then drill them. And in this sort of period of games, have we got the time to be preparing for the opposition and, on top of our fitness and everything, and then sort of saying we're also going to work on this formation because we want to start implementing this at certain points. So it's not just oh, by the way, lads, we're going to this formation. Everyone goes, well, I know exactly what to do, and we can do this telepathically. Like, it's not a
right. It worked on Football Manager.
Exactly. That's the sort of what I'm alluding to, and it's kind of like, it seems it's so close. Why bother completely ripping it up and starting again? And a lot of people say, well, we're not so close. But I think, as we've just alluded to, if we could stick 2 of those good 45 minutes together, we'd have got a win. If you sort of stick the first half against Ipswich and the second half against, I know I said Birmingham, didn't I? That's an away win. Even against Ipswich, that would have been, that would have probably been an away win. So I imagine if we were just absolutely abject for a whole 90 minutes, sort of 2 or 3 times on the trot, then Shuey would say, let's do something else. But I suspect he's kind of just, it's almost there, and he just can't, let it go, or doesn't see the benefit of like I say, ripping it all up to start again when it's the lesser of two evils to keep enduring with what he's doing.
By this time next month, more or less, we're going to have had QPR, Cardiff, Southampton, Huddersfield, and I'll discount Southampton from those other three because obviously they're right up there. Cardiff also, I mean, is not quite the same as QPR or Huddersfield because they are doing very well this season. But that being said, I do sort of view that as a game where, like, you could envisage us getting an away win, and certainly QPR and Huddersfield are two where you would really like to think it would be possible. If we lose, 3 and draw one of those 4 or lose them all, that's when I would imagine he will turn around and start thinking something needs to change here. And I take Ben's point about the personnel for sure, but I do think we have some options that he hasn't yet tried. But I think for now, if we can, that Coventry game is a good example where didn't deserve to lose. It was another terrible officiating call that has cost us. But that game, even with a mediocre performance, even just one notch up, from a 5 to a 6 out of 10 performance, I think we'd have won that game fairly comfortably because I just do not think the opposition were very good. I think we're going to have a few more like that in the next kind of month or two. And yeah, I guess after that, if we're still losing those games, I think it'll be time to say there's a more profound problem. But at the moment, as frustrating as it is, and believe me, it is frustrating as someone who travels up and down the country every week. I think it's time to maybe keep the faith just a tiny bit longer. So now, just to make sure I have this correct, now we have to do a costume change for the QPR preview pod to make that look to our YouTube viewers like we didn't just come off the. Oh, look, it's suddenly light outside.
Anyway, remember to like and subscribe if you're watching along on YouTube. Leave us a rating and subscribe if you're listening on your podcast apps. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I put a good one up that got some Leicester fans biting and somehow accidentally put classical music over the top of it. So I am learning, I won't lie. It's not going too well.
We are very down with the kids here at Argyle Life, as you can probably tell.
Very much so. I've learned how to hashtag on there. But you follow us on any of those social medias to join in the conversation. We like conversation. Cheers all.
Cheers.
Thanks, Aaron.